Hi, everybody. How's it going? Great. Nice to see everybody. Ready?
I am.
All right. So, Mikhail, for those who don't know, who are you and what is Blue Byte?
First of all, thanks for having us here today. My name is Mikhail Damiani. I am the CEO and co-founder of Blue Byte. And at Blue Byte, our goal is to help improve lives by connecting people and information through the physical world. And essentially, we're doing that by taking everyday physical items and transforming those into a digital platform to create this one-on-one channel between brands and consumers to unlock various use cases.
And so you play in the QR and NFC space. For folks in the audience who maybe come from a fashion background and aren't familiar with those technologies, can you walk us through exactly how it works?
Sure. So QR, NFC, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, quick response codes, those little black boxes that you can scan with your phone. NFC is near field communication. It's actually a technology that's been around for a while, and we use it these days for things like Apple Pay and Google Pay. But it also is a technology that's easily placeable inside of an item. And I have some items here actually that have it. And I'll actually do a small demonstration to show you. Thank you. This is an Adidas Parlay shoe. It has NFC embedded into it. And so all I do is just tap it with my phone without an app or anything. And it triggers a mobile experience that gives me the story behind that shoe around sustainability and some events and things like that. So it's a very, I would say, a very elegant and easy consumer experience. There's no battery required. There's no app required. And so it's a technology that's used pretty prevalently these days. But again, these are just two of many different types of technologies. I mean, you have other visual recognition technologies like Digimark, for example. And just to clarify, so Blue Byte is not an NFC company or a QR company. We're a consumer experience platform. So we actually work with all of these different technologies to make sure that the experience that the consumer gets after engaging, whether it's with a QR code or by tapping an NFC tag, is relevant to them. And we're invoking logic based on your location, based on the physical item you're interacting with, based on the product lifecycle, whether you're engaging inside of a store or after you've purchased the item, the experience actually evolves and changes over time based on your context. And that's really the goal of our platform.
Right. And so, in a way, products have always been the touch point between brands and consumers, but there's this new opportunity with the Internet of Things to connect products to the internet. Where do you see Blue Byte fitting into that opportunity? And maybe talk about some of your main use cases.
Sure. So, agreed. It's, the products are a touch point. The one thing I would say is that touch point has been underutilized because it's a one-time touch point and it's kind of a one-way touch point. And so our goal is basically to take that and elevate that and transform that from a touch point into a platform, into a channel that lives on through the entire product lifecycle and giving brands the ability to connect with consumers during the sale, pre-sale, and then post-sale, but then also for consumers to provide data and feedback back directly to the brand from the physical item. And so as far as use cases, authentication is a big use case, and that's both for basically giving data back to brands, but then also protecting consumers when they're buying the items. Storytelling is a big one, and you see that Bulgari bag there, and I have it up here as well. And they do a lot of storytelling inside of the retail environment, but then after you purchase the item, that story evolves and different content is provided to you. Commerce is a big one. And then the last one is all around sustainability and transparency.
Okay, so just to push back for a second, if I'm a Chanel, for example, right? I'm selling a Chanel bag directly to my consumer. The consumer knows that they're getting a Chanel bag because they bought it from me. So what would be the advantage for me as a Chanel to work with you and have your technology in one of my handbags?
Yeah, I'd say that's a limited part of the use case. So of course, if you're going to a Chanel or a Bulgari and you go to their store, you don't really need to authenticate it. You have enough trust in that experience to know that that's most likely an authentic item. I think there's a couple of use cases. One, it's authentication of returns. And so to the extent that you buy something from Chanel and you return it, for Chanel to know that what you're returning is in fact authentic, that's one key issue. Another one is really around the consumer experience. And if you look at Chanel and you look at other brands, a vast, or I'd say significant percentage of the items you're not buying directly from Chanel from a retail store. It could be from another retailer, or in many cases these days especially, it may be the secondary, tertiary ownership of that item. You may be buying it from somebody secondhand. And so these days, if you walk and you buy that Bulgari bag in the store and you register yourself, Bulgari knows that you're their customer. But if you sell that to somebody else, now all of a sudden Bulgari or Chanel has lost contact with the ultimate consumer of that. And so if you take this and you transform it from a touch point into more of this channel and this kind of communication platform, now you actually, as a brand, keep in touch throughout the entire product lifecycle, irrespective of where the product was purchased, irrespective if you're the first owner, second owner, or third owner. And that's, I think, something that brands aren't really doing these days.
Right. There's no way for them to continue that conversation. So, as we heard from the previous panel, sustainability is so important for the fashion industry and for the world right now to be thinking about. How can Blue Bite work with brands to help them achieve their sustainability and transparency goals?
Yeah, that's certainly, I would say, a hot topic and has been for, at this point, maybe 2.5 years. And this Adidas example here and the one you see up on the screen is a really good showcase of that. And so on the sustainability side, there are a couple of different facets that we plan. The first one is around storytelling. And so if I'm going into a store and I want to find out what makes that sneaker unique and the fact that it's made out of ocean plastics that they turn into thread, it's a lot easier for me to just tap that physical item and get that information versus reading something or a card on there. And so the ability to kind of promote this eco-clarity and look at the transparency and seeing, okay, what are the materials that went into that? What are the labor practices that went into creating that item? The supply chain, all of that can be shown to the consumer directly through the physical item. And brands are spending a ton of money, a ton of resources on doing this. And so why not be able to communicate that directly to the consumers through the physical product? But the cool thing is this experience evolves over time. So now after I've purchased the item, Adidas with Parlay, they do this run for the oceans every year. And so now I get a prompt through the experience in order to participate. So now this item kind of turns into my ticket or access token to the event. And then ultimately, the end of life is something that we're looking at as well. And so if you have a tag, let's say on that pair of shoes, most likely 1.5 2 years after you've used the item, you've thrown out that tag or that hang tag. But if it's directly attached and embedded into the item, I can tap it and it'll say, okay, you've used this item for 1.5 years. Here's your directions to the nearest store. You can go in, you can return it, you can get credit towards the purchase of a new shoe. And so now we kind of get into this whole circularity and making it a lot easier for the consumer to do that.
Absolutely. I want to talk about experiences now because, as we know in fashion, experiences are so important. And recently, Forbes reported that 74% of Americans prioritize experiences over products. So, how does Blue Bite enable unique experiences?
Yeah, I mean, everything we do is around experiences. We call our platform an experience platform. And so the primary way is digital experiences. So when you're interacting with the item, the content that you're getting is actually an experience, and it could be exclusive content. Some of the stuff we do can be exclusive playlist for a run. So if you have a running shoe, you tap it and it gives you some music that you can listen to during your run. But also some of the brands are taking this and kind of merging it with the physical world as well, where we do scavenger hunts. So you can tap a physical product in certain locations around the country or the city or the world, and you unlock additional content, additional offers, additional perks, if you will. And then sometimes the two are melded together. And this is a really cool launch that we just did recently with Adidas, where they actually launched a shoe in New York. It was called the Rivalry to kind of play off the 5 boroughs of New York. And the way that they distributed the shoe was the first time it was ever done in the footwear industry. Is basically they gave it to one person from each of the boroughs that was a sneakerhead influencer. And the only way that any other consumer can get the shoe was to find one of those people and tap their physical shoe. And so you couldn't get it online. You couldn't stand in line around the corner, at Dover Street Market and buy it. You had to find one of these people. And Adidas actually enabled the creativity from these creators to say, they actually gave them a budget and said you could promote it in any way you want on social media. People bought billboards. They rented out little newsstands in New York. So they got really, really creative around it. And then you go, you tap the shoe, and then it gets shipped to you, and you get it within a few weeks. And then every single person, every one of those 5 people who sold the shoe got actual money for every shoe they sold. So they turned everyday consumers into their distribution channel. And so the numbers were astronomical. I think they had something around 55 or 56% conversion, which, from a conversion rate for e-com is pretty tremendous. But if you take that same model and now you translate that more, in more scale, technically every single one of us can become a distribution point. If I like a pair of shoes that you're wearing, I can tap them, and then I can get them, and you can get some kind of credit or reward for the brand from the brand as being a promoter or an influencer. So I think just the opportunity behind that is huge, and that's an example of kind of combining that physical and digital experience.
And with all of these products floating around and with the data that's floating around with them, as a retailer, how can I tap into that data that is being generated? What type of insights can Blue Byte provide me?
So we're not a data company. I think data is just a nice byproduct of what we do, and obviously every single tap, every single scan, every interaction leaves a trace of data. And so brands traditionally have a lot of visibility into supply chain. They certainly have visibility in terms of inventory and what's happening in store. But once somebody buys that product or buys that item, there's kind of a black hole of data. And so for us, we're providing that data back to the brand. There's a lot of passive information that's being generated. So every single interaction, you can see where did somebody tap, what kind of item did they tap. You can make assumptions around that. You can look at the content that they're looking at. And so for us, that's the important part, is the context, because depending on where you are and what kind of item you're looking at and the content that you're looking at will change and evolve the experience over time. But for brands, they're getting that information back. But then there's also the feedback and actual proactive information that the consumers are doing. So a lot of our products, there's a real-time feedback loop. So if I bought a pair of shoes and I want to give feedback around the fit or the sizing, I could do that directly through the shoe. So it's kind of a combination of this passive information that's happening, but also proactive information from the consumers.
And on the flip side of that, as brands and retailers are collecting data, consumers are becoming more and more concerned about their privacy and security. So how does Blue Byte ensure for its clients, like Adidas that you're working with, a sort of infrastructural integrity to make sure that you're not giving away people's data?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, data and security is just a pillar of our platform. And with everything happening with GDPR and the California Privacy Act last year, it's super important. So for us, everything is encrypted, everything is stored securely. The one thing that a decision we made as a company years ago was we don't touch any PII. So anything that's customer facing, consumer data that has any type of personal identifiable information, we don't touch any of that. We give that directly to the brand. So we're just kind of an intermediary, but any of that information through an integration is stored and processed through their own CRMs. So that makes our life a lot easier.
But, you know, when we first started thinking and talking about fashion tech about 5-6 years ago, we had this idea that connected clothing would mean that clothing, by the very nature of its fiber, would be connected to the internet. And now we're talking about NFC chips and things that kind of are a means to that end, but not quite that future that we imagined. So I have to ask you, what's your vision for the future of connected clothing or fashion tech in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a place for both of those things. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So certainly there are certain brands and use cases where you do want connectivity, and certain athletic apparel where you do want your heart rate measured and you want sensors in your clothes that communicate directly to an app or something like that. For us, I think if you look at a more broad use case, it's the idea that every single product can be connected, right? We have this phone in our pocket that we're pretty much glued to day in, day out. That is a mechanism, that is the vehicle for connection. So if I can put something low cost into every single product to unlock that capability, unlock that storytelling, that to me, you know, is something that can happen over the next 5 to 10 years, I imagine, where every single one of the products that we own in some way, shape, or form will be connected. And what we like to say is that every single product has a story to tell. And so we're just the ones who are enabling the ability to tell that story.
Fantastic. And how can people follow you and stay in touch?
Best way is just to go to our website. All our social handles are there, and I'm also going to stick around for the rest of the day and for lunch. So if you have any questions, would love to connect with you.
Great. Well, Mikhail's going to be sticking around for a bit if there are further questions, so feel free to find him or myself. Thank you very much, and enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.